So our second speaker has over 20 years of experience working in media and communications, offering media and graphic design services to individuals and organizations. He is dedicated to utilizing media as a means to educate, engage, and inspire others. His expertise encompasses various aspects of media, including video production, print media, graphic design, and web design. He is one of the board members of Media Educators of Mindanao and head of the Center for Social Communication and Alumni Affairs of Holy Cross of Davao College. And if you're from Davao City, you all know him before, no, during the mornings, he greets you in his morning show on GMA 7, the regional network. So please welcome Mr. Derf Maiz. Sir Derf, take it away.
Thank you, Ma'am Jill. Good morning. Mabuhay ug madayaw. We understand, no, sometimes, I mean, not sometimes, no, most of the time may technical problem talaga because welcome to the Philippines, the internet. We've been trying to contact Sir Enzo, but we'll proceed with the program. Definitely, yung naging foundation ng discussion natin this day is really doon sa understanding about peace education, peace journalism, and then what's conflict-sensitive journalism, and conflict sensitivity and peace promotion. So maganda yung pagka-lay down ng foundation na yan. So we will proceed later on. And as Ma'am Jill mentioned a while ago that this is very technical in a sense, no? But definitely this could be applied or this is applicable in whatever field, no, kung saan man tayo. But again, it's also very important to understand yung what is conflict, no, ano yung violence. But napakaswerte ng grupong ito because we are doing this for how many years already, no? Sometimes we discover new things along the way, and we, compare and contrast the different frameworks of understanding conflict, understanding peace. But for me, sa akin naman is really the media, perspectives, the journalism perspective. But as I went through this particular framework, the conflict-sensitive journalism, nakita ko din that it's applicable not only for journalism or media, but also kahit sa field ko on communication and marketing, and even in organizational development. No? So now let's understand what is conflict. No? To really understand what is conflict, no? A while ago, may struggle tayo of understanding peace. No? I mean, may mga challenges tayo, no, to understand peace. But from here, from that perspective of peace, we will also differentiate conflict and violence. We will describe the conditions that may give rise to conflict and violence, and we'll demonstrate how conflict escalates, no? Kasi kahit sa level ng inyong, kahit sa bahay, in your own household, no, may problema sometimes na nag-escalate into violence. I hope hindi naman, no? That's why merong domestic violence na nangyayari even in that particular in a household setting, no? So what I do also in the classroom, before I introduce the tools, no, later on that I will also discuss with you, yun din yung perspective na tinitingnan natin. Ano yung mga conflict in your own household that sometimes, no, kung wala man, but maganda yan, but sometimes nag-escalate into a violent situation, no? So nag-uumpisa yan sa conflict. And so this is the topic that we will dig deeper as to what is conflict, and we'll differentiate or define conflict and violence, conditions that may give rise to conflict and violence, kailan siya nag-escalate into a violent situation, and the conflict escalation and stages of escalation ladder, which we also discuss in the conflict-sensitive journalism. Pero maganda ding tingnan ito that meron talaga, no, like it's very obvious na yung conflict napupunta talaga sa ganitong situation, a violent situation. We know that, no, kasi it's happening. It happened in the past, and yun, you maybe some of you have experienced. But kung to analyze that particular escalation, doon tayo papasok, and this is the workshop or the seminar all about. Sir Enzo mentioned about this, no, itong effect of a very, very prominent toy nowadays. Personally, sino bang hindi alam itong ako personally, it's really annoying yung sound of that clacking balls, no. We call this in our 90s days na bata pa ako is TikTok, but now iba na yung TikTok, no. So but the slides or the photo or the image shows is that may impact every time some problem in a country, for example, may conflict, it has impact in the particular region, for example, like Asian, no. Kung anong problema ng US, sometimes, no, we are affected, no, and international relationships are affected. So but what is it, the image is trying to show is that yung conflict may escalate into a violent one, a violent situation, war. Kaya nga nung sa explanation about peace education, peace journalism, war versus war journalism, because nung panahon ng giyera, World War II, for example, sa that time, no, ang journalist, ang media, yung kinukunan natin ng information, and they always frame that particular story sa violence. Of course, may patay sa ganito na side, and the attacks that happened, yung mga ganun ang framing, no. But later on, no, may nag-advocate like Galtong advocated and studied about it, that ang framing must be in peace, no. But may ongoing debate din yan sa journalists that are we going to advocate peace? Kasi when you advocate for something, you're already biased, no. Like what Ma'am Jill mentioned, meron lahat tayong biases, but journalism sa industry or sa field ng journalism, hindi pwedeng maging advocate ka of something kasi nga bias, clear ang bias niyan, no? So what is the image is trying to show is that once a conflict in a particular country can also affect, no. For example, the Ukraine and Russian war, no. Sabi natin wala siyang problema sa atin, but there are issues or there are stories. So for example, like the OFWs working there, no. So ganito ang image of that, na nagbabanggaan, and that sound, no, na ng annoying sound for me, but that could really affect every one of us. Okay. Now, for government information and communication officers working in, on, and around conflict areas, it is important to be constantly reminded that situations of violence can arise at any time among individuals or groups and can quickly engulf entire populations and communities. Like I mentioned, maliit man na conflict now, it could escalate into a bigger conflict, which can also be a violent situation, no? So kung tayo ay nagtatrabaho bilang communicator, or for example like information officer of a particular government agency, or even private organizations, we have to be aware that sometimes these conflicts can escalate to a bigger one, and before it could escalate to a bigger one, alam na natin how we going to communicate this particular conflict. Moreover, they may also trickle in the peripheral areas. Equally important is the knowledge that violence can draw its intensity from previous as well as present conflicts, and not just from the most recent flashpoint. Ito kasi yung naging concern natin sa media in the past, where kung kailan nangyari yung conflict, doon lang tayo nagko-concentrate, doon tayo nagko-cover. Later on in our next session, I will also show you that a particular fire incident, for example, may nangyaring sunog, may taong namatay inside that particular household, we only cover that as is, no. Yun yung always natin sa media ginagawa, no. They frame it like isang tao ang namatay matapos masunog ang isang bahay, and that's it. But in conflict sensitivity and peace promotion, and also in conflict sensitive journalism, we dig deeper to that particular situation. So we are not event-based report. We are not for event-based reporting. We dig deeper to the issue. So that's the point here. Another pitfall can be for a while. Unfortunately, conflict and violence are not standard part of training in communication, because who are communication graduates here, who are communication teachers, or media practitioners, or media educators here, if you can recall, no, yung mga curriculum natin in the past, wala talagang about conflict and violence, no. We are taught of the 5 Ws, 1H. Maybe some of you here are champions in the yung mga press conferences, but definitely wala sa atin na, I hope no sa bagong generation meron na, but in the past talaga walang concept or subject that discuss about journalism covering conflict, no, yung one whole semester to discuss about it, no. So unfortunately, conflict and violence are not a standard part of training in communication, leaving government information officers making in conflict areas vulnerable to several reportorial pitfalls. One pitfall can be solely focused on the physical violence, like what I've said. Why is it important for government information and communication officers? Ito kasi basis ni Sir Enzo about CSPP, no? Why is it important for government information and communications officers to frame conflict and violence this way? To familiarize themselves with basic concepts on conflict and violence, as well as escalating and de-escalating conflicts. I just have to put emphasis on this na when you are trained to be conflict sensitive and peace promoter, hindi, and especially if you write news stories, no, about conflicting, conflict stories with conflict, hindi ibig sabihin that you will also put their solutions, or you will also include your own perspective of how this problem can be resolved. Hindi pwede yun, bias na yun. But if you know different perspectives, because meron ka ng tools na ginamit, which I will discuss later, then you will know how to write your story. That's why in peace, as conflict sensitive journalism, yung good writing kasali doon, because you know what to write, no, and how to write it, right? For communication professionals working with conflict, it is helpful to be reminded that many situations of violence arise from conflicting relationships at the horizontal level among individuals, groups, populations, and communities. So ano ba yung conflict? Conflict is a situation where two or more individuals or groups try to pursue goals which they believe they cannot share. So wala talagang point in their discussion na pwede silang mag-agree, no. Sometimes we say that, no, let's agree to disagree, so just to meet at a common ground at the center. But we define conflict that there are two or more individual groups that try to pursue their individual goals which they believe they cannot share, no. So that's the definition of conflict. Sometimes medyo when we discuss conflict, no, paano natin yan sinishare sa ating mga estudyante, for those who are teachers here, that merong conflict in literature like me versus self, me versus nature, me versus others, yung mga ganon, no. But here also we also adopted the same definition, okay. And because people do not always want to do the same thing, or people want the same thing but do not agree on how to achieve it, there will be conflict. If their disagreement or conflict is managed, it can be positive process. But when conflict is not managed, it becomes violent. This dynamic of conflict, or how people choose to approach conflict, whether peacefully or violently, is deeply rooted in how invested people are towards the goal and how deeply they value their relationships with each other. So ito yung pinaka talaga, no, goal na, that for example, if your perspective is journalism, you will not write, no, to fan the fire, no. Hindi ka nagsusulat para mas maging violente pa what is being violent already, no. So yun yung pinaka goal din namin sa journalism perspective. On communications practitioners, not necessarily journalists, no, communications practitioners, yun din, no, because sometimes we are met with instances or concerns in our respective offices na sometimes it entails mediation, negotiation. Now, if you are a communication practitioner, if hindi mo alam that this particular problem, where will this lead to, then may problema, no. So that's why as a communication practitioner, we should know also and understand the concepts of conflict escalation. I think Sir Enzo is here, Ma'am Jill.
Still spotty internet connection, sir. Please proceed.
All right, thank you, Ma'am Jill. When parties these are the key points, no, in understanding conflict. When parties give more importance to their goals and less importance to the value of their relationships, or worse, devalue the relationship, they will compete and the conflict escalates. So I'll just skip through this. I will also discuss this later, no, in my um, topic, no. When we devalue our relationship with others, we fail to recognize the legitimacy of their needs and rights to satisfy their needs. We deny their needs, often because we fail to see them as legitimate enough to warrant a joint exploration of other causes of action. So let's put this in the perspective of your household, di ba? Kunyari, si ate, no, gusto ng ganito, ang bunso gusto ng ganito. And sometimes pag malapit yung edad, no, ako I experienced that personally na malapit yung edad with my older brother, we resorted to a violent resolution. We saw that violent resolution of our conflict. So ito, because when we devalue our relationship with others, we fail to recognize the legitimacy of our needs. No? Later, when we discuss about tools, we understand that each party involved in that particular conflict, meron din silang positions, interests, and needs, or PIN, and that I will discuss later. And that's part of understanding na lahat ng involved in a conflict can be analyze ang kanilang positions, ang interest nila, and saka kanilang needs for us to understand it further. No, I mean for us to understand the conflict, and later on when hindi man tayo ang magiging instrument for that particular conflict to be, to stop that, to escalate into a worse scenario, then maybe something, no, na pwede natin maitulong, no. So this dynamic of conflict is also tied deeply in the concept of balance of power. Of course, if a power balance exists, the issues that gave rise to the conflict can be made visible. And because it is out in the open or on the surface, these issues can be threshed out and resolved in a manner both parties see it. If there is no balance of power, the weaker side will less likely be willing to engage in assertive confrontation and more likely to give in. So very prominent na example will be during in the height of the pandemic, meron tayong concern about ayuda, no? So sino bang hindi familiar about ayuda? Because sabi ng iba, hindi fair, hindi systematic ang kanyang distribution. And you know that what happened in Quezon City back then, at sometime in 2021, I think, no, na nagka-problema sa ayuda because hindi nga siya systematic. And the release of ayuda, and it's very noisy in social media when people say that kahit hindi dinaanan lang ng mga taga-barangay, hindi binigyan na, hindi fair yung distribution. And there may conflict na agad, no, because other people or other those who are involved may say that hindi fair ang mga taga-barangay because they only prioritize kung sino yung mga kakilala, supporters and all, no. So that alone, no, so that really says a lot about the conflict because there's no balance of power. The weaker side, which are the residents, no, will less likely to be willing to engage in assertive confrontation and more likely to give in. On the surface, there will appear to be no conflict in, for example, later I will also discuss that sa surface parang walang conflict, but the tensions go around where it remains latent and grows like a festering infection until it finds an opportunity to emerge and erupt. So, for example, in a situation like there is no conflict, theoretically, there is no conflict, whether visible or invisible. That's the 4 states of conflict that this particular table is trying to show. No, so I will be discussing this later also, no, as conflict tools. And there's also surface conflict, where on the other hand are conflict situations that have outward manifestations. Surface conflicts result when there is an incompatibility of behavior but a compatibility of goals. So meaning iba lang yung actuations ng a particular party, but we have the same goal. That's what we call surface conflict. The next one is latent conflict. Refers to a condition where there is only a potential for expression and escalation. There is an incompatibility of goals. Though the behavior parties remains compatible, pareho tayo how we deal with the conflict, but our goals are different. So it might escalate to a bigger conflict or worse, violent situation. The next one is open conflict. Of course, this is very obvious conflict. Meanwhile, may be defined as latent conflicts that have found an outlet for expression. There are deep-seated tensions that exist and have evolved over time and over the compatibility of both goals and behavior. So again, the conflict, the four states of conflict, the absence of conflict, of course, that's no conflict. The lower third or the lower left of that quadrant, it means the same goals. You have compatible behavior. Walang conflict talaga, no? So you have peace and harmony. And next to that particular, in that quadrant, no, lower right of that quadrant, it's called latent conflict. Different ang goals, pero compatible naman ang behavior. The same ang how you deal with it, pero magkaiba yung goals, no? On the upper part of that quadrant, the upper left is the surface conflict. Same goals, pero magkaiba yung behavior. So it means that pareho naman tayo ng gusto, pero magkaiba lang tayo how we deal with it. So that's the surface conflict. And that then another state of conflict is the open conflict, which is on the higher quadrant, which is upper right of that quadrant. Different goals, but different goals and incompatible behavior. So that's the four states of conflict. Okay. So in summary, it is predictable that conflict will arise in the situations. So mentioned na kanina pa in the first part of this discussion, resources are scarce and not shared fairly, as in food, housing, jobs, or lands. That's very predictable. Kasi nga, like the pandemic, no, during the ayuda season, ayuda period of the pandemic, kasi nga walang trabaho, nasa bahay, naka-lockdown, so walang pagkain, and then andon ang conflict. No? Of course, there are more parang bigger issues like housing, jobs, or land. Conflict is very, it is predictable that conflict will arise in this situation if there is little or no communication between the two groups. Kaya nga, sinasabi natin, miscommunication. No? Sometimes in the organization kung saan kayo, yun yung most of the time when I hope merong mga HR personnel dito na or with experience with HR. If you look at complaints inside the HR office, most likely, no, puro mga miscommunication lahat, no, between a party or another. And also, ganun din, no, sa media can also be a cause of conflict because may miscommunication of the information, no. So hindi naman intentionally na naging misinformation siya or disinformation siya. Pero sometimes meron lang mga mali na mga information na nabigay, no, not intentionally. That's why very iba din yung mga principles and guidelines of being in the media. Okay? Conflict will arise. Very predictable that conflict will arise in different escalations. The groups will have incorrect ideas and beliefs about each other. Kasi ganyan ka, no? Kasi ganyan yung grupo ninyo. That's why, no? DDS ka or Dilawan, Pinklawan. No? Yun yung during the election season, no? Because we have different beliefs because we don't even talk about it, or if we talk about it, close-minded tayo. So that's a very perfect example for different groups have incorrect, or each group has incorrect ideas and beliefs about each other. Unresolved grievances exist from the past. Kasi nga inuungkat, no? So let's look at our household. I hope hindi siya relatable, but kasi yung mga asawa when they encounter marital problems, they inuungkat yung past. That's another conflict. Okay? Power is unevenly distributed. So again, kasi nga may hindi balanse yung sharing of power, kaya may ganong escalation of that particular conflict. Now, sinasabi ko kanina, if it's a conflict, it may escalate into a bigger one, which most of the time physical violence na siya, no? So but what is violence? Violence consists of actions, words, attitudes, structures, or systems that cause physical, psychological, social, or environmental damage and or prevent people from reaching their full human potential. Violence is more than behavior. It also involves context and attitudes. So a while ago, no, we talked about Galtong's conflict triangle, or the triangle of violence. No, have you seen the triangle of sadness? Yeah? It's like that, the play of power, the power play inside that particular movie. And sa conflict sensitive journalism, we talk about violence, not only physical violence. No? Underlying that particular violence, meron siyang structural and cultural that we discussed a while ago. Structural siya if it is the violence or the problem being legitimized. It means merong law, for example, that it allows that particular issue to, pwede na siya kasi considered naman siya andun sa law. Cultural siya because ganun, yun, like what Ma'am Jill a while ago gave, no? An example of, for example, like sa ibang culture, abusuhin ang babae because they allow it sa kultura nila, something like that, no? So much violent behavior occurs also in the private domain, for example, in families where women and children experience abuse. There is another deeper layer of the understanding of violence that, like I mentioned a while ago, but there are not violent in themselves, but can easily become the source of violence, or at least allow violent behavior and violent structures to operate. But these are reports about violence. More specifically, these reports depict violent behavior. These are not reports about conflict, which is the core subject of conflict sensitivity and peace promotion communications. Okay, so a while ago na-mention naman itong ABC triangle, or the attitudes, behavior, contradiction. So it was adopted also sa CSJ because this is Galtong's ABC triangle, and they coined it also the triangle of violence. No, ito yung sinasabi namin namin ni Ma'am Jill a while ago, that for example, a physical abuse or physical na violence like beating, shooting, killing, rape, etc. That's what we can see on the surface. So if you look at the triangle, para din siyang, others also adopted this and called it the iceberg violence, no? Because yung tip of the iceberg or the tip of the triangle there, no, itong behavior, yun lang yung nakikita natin. But in in psychology, they also dig deeper to the attitudes, assumptions, and also the contradiction and context. But in Galtong's triangle, this one, it evolved into triangle of violence, just para i-analyze din nila yung war coverage ng journalists. So ito yun, no? We'll discuss also later, no, to really apply this particular tool in analyzing conflict. On the other hand, reporting conflict in the context of conflict sensitivity and peace promotion involves determining the attitudes and assumptions of the parties in conflict. Napaka-importante po na tayo ngayon, no, to this day forward, we understand conflict deeper because we understand that a conflict, meron talaga siyang mas malalim na cultural cause and structural cause, no? These include what sort resources or needs or goals they are fighting over and how they are undermining or frustrating each other in the process. So the goal becomes making the attitudes and assumptions as well as the context and contradiction visible doon sa itong particular model of the triangle of violence. And for the latent layer, yung hindi nakikita but may possibility of escalating into a more violent or more mas malaking conflict, mas nakikita natin ito, no? So ito yung sinasabi that when you have this training, then you look at conflict right away using the tools na na-analyze nyo agad. And I will share later, no, yung mga practices and also output of those who underwent this particular training. As conflict escalates, communication professionals and coverage will be confronted to add details to the perpetrated violence in the reports, though the primary task is still to explain the conflict that led to the violence. Okay, so this one, another triangle, but it's the same, no? The direct violence or direct observable. We see that we look at it, no? So when we are conflict sensitive and promoter of peace, no, kailangan alam natin that this particular framework, this particular model here ganun din ang pagtingin natin that sometimes we don't condemn right away. Bakit nangyayari itong particular conflict? We have to understand deeper through the structural cause of that particular conflict. Bakit ginawa ni Party A, Party B, etc. And then also the cultural cause. Okay? I think I can discuss this later further here. So I'll discuss about the for a while. Okay. So na-explain naman a while ago about the definition of structural and cultural violence and the direct violence. So let's have an example just to give you more perspective. In the case of a domestic abuse, the physical assault of a man against his spouse, for example, the direct violence is the assault. While the belief that it is a man's right to discipline his spouse is cultural violence. Kasi, di ba, kung ano tayo, patriarchal, and then meron tayong before, no? Kasi ngayon, mas maganda na yung level of understanding and level of education na hindi, because there's law also, no, na protecting women. So, before, because very patriarchal yung ating society, that's why when a man physically assault his spouse, for example, because he or she or he wants to discipline the wife, culturally sinasabi that that's the right of the man to discipline his spouse. So yun yung parang sinasabi about the triangular the violence triangle of violence, no? So yun yung sinasabi that mas malalim yung cause, mas malalim yung reason na tinitingnan when we look at particular instance of particular incident of violence. I think I can skip this one because andun yun sa lecture ko naman. So let's discuss about the escalation of conflict. So Glassell in 2000 also coined that there is a diagram showing observable stages of conflict. So as a conflict sensitive and a peace promoter also, we have to understand that lahat ng conflict mag-escalate talaga yan. Of course, if we know that conflict, we understand, we acknowledge that conflict will escalate into something worse, then there is also an opportunity and possibility that we can de-escalate this particular conflict. No? If you are a journalist, alam mo na kung paano siya isulat na hindi siya mag-escalate. And if you are like a communicator, you know how to mediate, how to discuss about it in a manner na hindi na siya mag-escalate. So this particular diagram shows that when conflict, regardless of whether it is an armed or military conflict or an unarmed or social conflict, erupts into violence. It unfolds into in observable stages that can move up or move down, as shown in this particular diagram. So, for example, if there's tension already, no, 'di ba? Ano bang mas relatable? For example, if you have like your coworker, meron ng tension, like you're not really, you don't have a good relationship with your coworker, and then there's tension, and later meron ng debate in terms of output A of output of party A or an output of party B, and then meron ng, and then it will escalate. The debate will escalate into action. So for example, there's an opportunity for you to sit down and discuss about your outputs, and then you said no, this is not a good output or something like that, and then you walk out from that particular discussion, then nag-escalate na, no? Kasi from tension, nagdebate kayo, and then nag-walk out, and then formation of coalitions. Yung nag-walk out pumunta sa kanyang mga kamarites, and you going to your office mates, and then you discuss about you discuss against each other, no? So yung itong isa sinasabi, party A, sabi, alam mo ba, ito, ganyan. And then the another side. So, and then meron ng mga attacks, no? Very very shallow ito na conflict, but I'm just giving an example that later, no, meron tayong mga social issues na din that I can share, no. So the fifth in that escalation diagram is the attack and loss of face. So sinasabi na natin, ganyan talaga yan. Wala kasi yung matinong mga output. No? And then you put that on social media. Parinig sa social media and all. And then punta na sa number 6, threatening strategy. Sabi, kung hindi niya take down yung post niya, I will file the report to HR. I will file the report and I will push for his or her suspension. Meron na ganong mga threats. No? And then on the 7th level of that escalation, conflict escalation, limited blows and sanctions. So meron na talagang natanggal, na suspend, meron na nangyaring HR issues because it escalated into that. And I hope hindi naman talaga super violent na magpataya na, but definitely it could happen kung hindi talaga na de-escalate yung conflict. So it will lead to that final in the escalation diagram, the self-destruction. Kasi nga the other one medyo siguro feeling niya na this is the only way that I can parang makabalos, what do you call that? I can take revenge of this situation is to kill the opposing parties. So, hindi naman sana, no? But definitely that is a scenario na pwede natin tingnan all the time when we look at conflict, that it could really escalate, but also it could de-escalate. So paano ba? For example, the tension started with that, and then it went to the debate, and then action instead words, nag-walk out, etc. How about in that particular period, nag-intervene na agad yung may alam about conflict sensitivity and peace promotion. So sometimes baka pwedeng pag-usapan yung positions, interests, and needs natin. No? So we peel down the onion, or maybe a timeline tool is very applicable. Let's look at the situation on a particular timeline na bakit ito humantong sa ganito. And I will discuss that later in my topic. Okay? So I think Okay, the key points here, 4 ways communication professionals cause conflicts to escalate into violence. What is it about? It's about media and journalists. No? Ignoring agreements and focusing on disagreements. Kasi di ba, ang media talaga, sinasabi natin, they focus on conflict because, again, conflict sells. In every news story na ginagawa ng media, meron daw conflict talaga, no? But communication professionals should not do this, no? That do not just focus on disagreements. Do not ignore agreements, no? So yung sa media kasi is that hindi umabot sa magandang usapan ang peace negotiation ng MNLF at ng government, MILF and government, something like that. No, so yun yung focus nila because maganda sa kanila yung disagreements because they think that it would lead to another discussion or further discussion. Highlighting the division through screaming headlines. So, for example, like walang agreement. Yun yung mga always headline natin. Nag-walk out, yung mga ganon. We like to, the media really like to highlight that in that story. For example, di ba, pag may Senate hearing, we want to see those type of drama inside the plenary that nag-walk out si senator na ganito, and that's the headline right away, no? Nag-walk out. We don't even discuss, no? Bakit nag-walk out? Prior to that walk out, and walk out is it really good? I mean, the conduct of that particular senator, something like that, no? So, yun yung mga na-highlight. But again, ito yung mga dapat iwasan natin if you're a communication professional. Us versus them reporting, no? So ito always very very prominent sa media, like sinabi ni ganito, ito naman ang sagot ni ganito. And that's the result of really not having that particular perspective of these tools, no? Kasi kung wala kang background on conflict sensitivity and peace promotion, then media tends to really frame that particular story, or almost all stories ganun talaga, like us versus them. If the government will do this, what will the citizens will react, or yung affected. But yun lang, so surface level lang. Reporting the fighting and the fight statistics, ilan yung namatay, ilan yung talo dito sa side na ito, ganun lang, no? Like it's like a stat on numbers of death. Ganun lang ang reporting ng media. So ito naman yung don'ts. What are we going to do? Ano ba talaga dapat ang gawin? Keeping communication open to all parties and helping clarify the message. Kasi doon sa escalation, ito yung dapat gawin natin, no? That to really make that communication open to all, no? Addressing mistrust and actively promoting the reestablishment of relationships. Kasi meron dating experience like my experience dati like network A has an exclusive access to a particular party involved in a particular conflict. Now, network A, since they claim it is exclusive, so ang network B doesn't have an access to that particular party. So, may problema ngayon kasi sa story ng isa, walang side nung inexclusive nga nung network A, no? So the problem there is that walang ibang perspective. So now after that, no, that's number one. Number two is that after that naging ano na din na that when we interview someone, that particular party na inexclusive, we have to address that mistrust na is it okay with you, or are you, was it deliberate na itong particular network ang pinili mo to give your statement, something like that. So you have to address the mistrust there and actively promote the reestablishment of relationships. Number three, repairing distorted perceptions and negative attitudes, no? So yun yung isa, mahirap talaga sa atin to really repair that perceptions, bad perceptions towards other person, especially yung hindi maganda yung relationship mo and negative attitudes. No, I experienced that, no, especially in the office, that you have someone you don't really like. I mean, distorted yung perceptions mo towards that. And as a communication professional, you have to understand it further, no, para mas maganda yung how you deal with this particular conflict. No? And number four, actively calling for the control of hostility and reduce inequity. So kailangan very ano yan, you have to really make that known na yung controlled ang hostility and pantay-pantay, no, in a sense na you give each other a platform, a time, no, to also discuss their sides. Okay, how will these four above mentioned dose support conflict de-escalation? So if you do these four, so may chance talaga mag-de-escalate yung conflict. Itong apat na ito, no? So again, this will be given to you. So please refer to those, no? Again, but my emphasis is that these are the things that you have to do to de-escalate a conflict. So how will these four above mentioned do support de-escalation? Okay. Clear and open communication is conducive and necessary in settling conflicting goals and interests. It's really important, no, na to ako sa experience ko to really write down the goals and interests. Sometimes the conflicting parties are participative. Sometimes it's out in the open, and then you just have to categorize that, whether that's the goal or the needs or the positions or the interests that I will discuss also later. Don't worry. And number two, addressing mistrust and actively promoting the re-establishment of relationships paves the way for an openness to mediation and conflict management. Kasi sometimes in an office conflict, office drama lang, no? Minsan nahirapan na yung mga heads or HR to intervene, to negotiate. And kasi nga walang trust na, no, and walang goal of re-establishing a healthy relationship. Repairing distorted perceptions and negative attitudes sets the stage of being open to arbitration. Sometimes hindi naman natin, once we face our conflicting party or yung kalaban natin in a conflict, hindi naman natin dinediretso agad about our perception because we are protective also. But if there's a chance, how we can surface this out, then mas maganda. Calling for the control of hospitality and reduce inequality can lead external interventions like peacekeeping and humanitarian assistance. Okay, so Ma'am Jill, Sir Enzo partially, and Ma'am Jill also shared or laid down the foundation of understanding conflict sensitivity piece promotion on the also these are many adoptions of different frameworks on peace, no, like peace education and peace conflict peace education, peace journalism, and conflict sensitive journalism. So, Ma'am Jill.
Yes, thank you so much, Sir Derv. So that explains conflict and violence, no? So if you notice, hindi basta-bastang 0 to 100 agad, no? So there are actually steps to the escalation, no? Na conflict muna siya, and then it escalates to violence. Now, okay, so woo, right? So much information out there. While we're giving time to Sir Derv to prepare his actual presentation, no, which is the conflict analysis tools. Let's ground this muna. Okay, what are we again here for? This topic is called conflict sensitivity and peace promotion. And yet, why are we talking about violence, ma'am? Diba? Because that's the main thing. That's the most important thing. Before we can even promote peace or genuinely promote peace, we have to understand first that that's why it is so difficult for us to have peace kasi may conflict pa. And when we continuously deny the conflict, which is actually very often, this is very often, no, now we deny conflict or we don't try to understand the conflict or, denial, um, um, ignoring conflict, or parang you just don't really want to talk about conflict because it's so complex, diba? We are not equipped to understand conflict, and that's why the conflict continues to happen, no, from latent nagbobrew na siya, no. So and to be honest, no, while we are discussing this, we're not perfect people. Okay, ako, Sir Dirk, and all of us here, we've all encountered conflicts in our workplaces, in our family. But I hope that when you understand that, oh, may levels pala. And so where does communication comes in? So first you have to analyze, oh, this is where we are right now. We're in this level. So as we are official communicators in our spheres of influence in our workplaces, dapat we are already aware na saan level na ba tayo so that we know how to address it. Like what forms of communication can we do at this point and at this point and then at this point. Kasi if we reach level 7, di ba? Ano ba yun? Di ba level 7 yun? Yung talagang wala na, all out war na. It's only because we refuse to communicate in the early stages of conflict. O, di ba? And so that's really the main problem. And that's why we really have to accept that there is conflict. Okay, conflict is not a bad word. Conflict happens because may mga disagreements tayo. And disagreements can be very small things, no? Or can be very serious things. But at the end of the day, when these small things snowball, no, and they would eventually become an avalanche. And yun yung iniiwasan natin. And that's why we have to be sensitive to conflict, right? So I'd like to hear from you, no? So we still have a little bit of time. Can I hear initial feedback? Because later we don't have much time to really feedback on our learning stuff, because we will be doing this on a Google form and we will be doing an activity using the tools. So I'd like to hear from you so far. Any new thing that you have learned so far from Sir Durf's presentation of violence and the escalation of conflict and the escalation of violence. May I hear from Sir Romeo? I see Sir Romeo. Thank you, sir, for being here today from GVC. What's GVC, sir? May I know? Sir Romeo, are you here? I could see you. Let's sige, parang busy Sir Romy. Let me hear from Sir Vince of Ateneo de Davao Senior High School. Sir Vince.
Hi, hello everyone. Hello, Ma'am Jill. Yeah, I was very amazed, no, doon sa level of escalation because that was really something na, tama ka, no, if we don't actually do something early, talagang it will lead to yun nga, self-destruction pinakalas. Some of the things I'm happy na because conflict sensitive journalism that's already part of our curriculum in Ateneo, not just in college but also in senior high school. And that is something talaga that is very needed, no? Especially when we talk about conflict, it's not just about away na or gera, but it has something to do with our daily lives, kumbaga. So how we resolve conflict. So I'm actually looking forward to hear more about conflict resolution, peace building, especially in the context classroom or context within the academe. Kasi as teachers, that's something that we really need to tell or discuss or inform our students about because sila na yung susunod. And apparently a lot of learners, especially in my experience, they don't have that kind of not really resilience, no, pero yung parang madali lang silang may konting conflict lang or may konting lang, immediately they feel down kagad. So this is something very crucial sa atin, especially sa ating mga teachers. Yun na po. Thank you, Ma'am Jill. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sir Vince. Yes, no, so yeah, CSJ is integrated already in the MIL subject of Ateneo. So medyo advanced, no? But it's good that you're still learning a lot because we don't talk about a lot of the violence part, no? So this is a new topic too. So escalation of violence is very important that we understand that. Okay, so the next part of the lecture will be the tools na. All right. So just to ground, no. Again, we talked about conflict sensitivity. We have to understand that for us to promote peace muna, okay? Kasi promoting peace will be empty if we don't understand where the conflict is coming from. So we understood that, okay, pwedeng mag-escalate, pero ang haba pa pala ng steps, di ba? Bago mag-total all-out war. So, kailangan as communicators, we know, okay, we should always prevent even level 2 from happening. So we do that by analyzing. Okay, and so right now, Sir Derf is ready to share, no? This is really in-depth, and please learn from this because this will be the bulk of our workshop activity this afternoon. So Sir Derf will be explaining now the tools for conflict sensitivity and peace promotion and communication related subjects. So when you learn these tools, then later in the afternoon, with me, with my lecture and Sir JD's lecture, we will help you, okay, use this, okay, paano natin gagamitin itong tools na to in our subjects. But for now, it's very important you understand the tools kasi mastery of the tools is a new skill that you will learn, that you will be able to use as a content creator, no? As a teacher, and most especially as a media consumer. All right? So Sir Derf, you can now start.
Thank you very much once again, Ma'am Jill. Mabuhay Madaya once again. No? Uminom lang ako na saglit na. But anyway, as we are advanced like 5 minutes advanced in our schedule, but I will consume that extra time later with this particular topic. No? So again, this is about the tools that we are going to use. So kanina, no, Ma'am Jill and Sir Enzo mentioned, and partially I also shared about the foundation of understanding conflict and violence. No? Importante yon that now, sinasabi natin, paano ba natin i-analyze yung conflict? Paano ba i-analyze yung violence that happened? So may mga tools to use it. No? So of course, sabi natin, like I share this also in my class, especially context-sensitive journalism class or writing for TV or whatever na subject that is related to journalism or broadcasting. I emphasize that hindi ito minsan fit sa kung ano ang reality ng isang newsroom because sometimes, kaya nga, no, nagmamadali tayo to submit. I mean, the media practitioners who are here, maybe, no, this is a reality na in a day, we have to submit at least 5 stories, 4, 5 stories, no? That's the reality. And also sa atin naman as teacher or communication practitioner, for example, hindi agad-agad natin ito parang nagiging way of life, because we have to go through that phase. Like ako talaga, my experience is to really share, I mean to write, to write the analysis, no, using the tools, no. Mas maganda sa pag-analyze ko yung makikita ko visually how the conflict unfolds, something like that, no. So but later on, sabi nga ni Ma'am Jill kanina, hindi naman kami talaga perfect dito, hindi din kami ganun na level na, you know, when you look at conflict and then you can analyze right away, no. But if this could be part of your system now as a teacher particularly, then mas madali na sa inyo to discuss about conflict inside the classroom setting. And of course, the role of a teacher is to also equip your students to have that particular skills in analyzing conflict. So again, hindi tayo nag-iisa dito to analyze conflict. We have tools to use, okay? We will not do it alone, okay? Enhance understanding, ito yung mga objectives of conflict sensitivity in communication-related subjects. Equip participants with practical tools for conflict-sensitive communication. Promote peace building through effective communication practices. So I just want to emphasize that ito yung parang naging adoption ng naging framework, no. Again, conflict sensitive journalism, very much journalism perspective yan, no. So like what Sir Enzo a while ago mentioned and Ma'am Jill mentioned about conflict sensitive journalism, we have a teaching guide to, yung perspective talaga niya is really for journalists, no. Paano magsulat para sa radyo, sa TV or sa website, no. Conflict sensitive journalism, or CSJ, is a body of knowledge born from the study of journalism as a discipline and understanding of conflict science. It's a science, no, yung conflict, pag-study niyan, and the experience of hundreds of local, national, and international journalists who are part of the Fellowship of Media Practitioners called PECOJON. Despite its parlance, CSJ is not so much the craft of covering violence and war. So kasi naman ang origin talaga nito, like sa Galtong's triangle of violence, galing talaga yan sa covering war stories, no. Pero now in CSJ, and also based on experience, you can analyze conflict kahit hindi pa siya talagang violent na, no. You can analyze social issues that I will share in a while, no. And these frameworks are being used now to have this conflict sensitive communication. It's like a broader perspective and broader application. Conflict sensitive journalism principles and practices can be applied to communication as a whole to promote a more constructive and empathetic approach in various contexts. So that's the background. Why are we using the framework, the lens of CSJ in conflict sensitive communication or conflict sensitivity as a whole and peace promotion? Okay. Why are we using conflict sensitive communication? Because again, the principles and practices in CSJ, we are using it now for this particular discussion, because again, it helps in dialogue facilitation. So a while ago, in the escalation of conflict, very important ang dialogue, no. So that's a simplistic way of looking at that picture na, oh, dapat mag-dialogue, but paano mo ifa-facilitate yung dialogue? So these are the tools that we can use, and this is one of the purposes why we have to understand and be educated on the conflict sensitive communication. And also we can analyze conflict. Of course, that's the main purpose, no. Kailangan ma-analyze natin ano ba yung conflict all about conflict sensitive wait for a while. Okay, conflict analysis, and yes, kailangan hindi lang tayo conflict sensitive, we understand, and we understand conflict and escalation of that particular conflict. We can predict, no, in a sense, no, kung saan to ipapunta. Okay. Conflict journalism sa CSJ perspective encourages journalists to analyze the underlying causes and dynamics of conflicts. This analytical approach can also be applied to other communication scenarios. Teachers, no, we communicate to our students every now and then, every time. And then by examining the root causes of disagreements or tensions in various contexts, individuals and organizations can gain a deeper understanding of the issues at hand and develop more informed and nuanced communication strategies. So hindi lang siya pang journalist, pang sports pa. Hindi lang siya pang journalist, pang teacher din siya. So that's the reason. And ethical reporting. So of course, news perspective, journalist perspective kasi yung CSJ, but conflict-sensitive journalism upholds ethical reporting standards such as accuracy, fairness, and impartiality. These principles can serve also as our guiding framework kahit teachers, for communicators as a whole. By promoting truthful and balanced communication, individuals and organizations can avoid conflict and contribute to a more informed public discourse. Kasi, di ba, malaki yung responsibility na nalagay sa atin. Sometimes, our students will ask, Ma'am, sir, what can you say about this particular conflict? And even if it's not the subject or the topic of that particular subject, we have to, give also our insight na in a manner na ethical. Hindi pwedeng you have to to influence your student na to side or to say thing against a particular dahil bias mo yon, something like that, no. So these tools can really help us, no. Sensitivity to diverse perspectives. So sa CSJ, it recognizes the importance of including diverse voices and perspectives, multi-party geometry, no. In communication naman, so what we are using in communication, embracing diversity and actively seeking out different viewpoints can help avoid polarization. So and foster inclusive conversation. So hindi lang siya party A and party B, no. So meron naman tayong training sa journalism, especially those who are journalism or mass comm graduates. Lahat tayo na dumaan sa ganyan, sinasabi 5Ws 1H lang and two sides of the story. Hindi na siya two sides of the story. Nag-evolve na ngayon. Sa CSJ, we do multi-party geometry, and I will discuss later. By promoting inclusivity and giving marginalized voices a platform, conflict-sensitive communication contributes to a more equitable and understanding society. And bakit pa natin ito ginagawa? Of course, peace-building orientation. Kasi nga, peace-building, peace promotion yung ginagawa natin. CSJ aims to contribute to peace-building efforts by promoting understanding, tolerance, reconciliation. Hindi naman natin yan blatantly sinasabi sa ating output, but through our output, may ganon na perspective. Applying a peace-building orientation to communication or to teaching as a whole means actively seeking opportunities to promote empathy, identify common ground, and find constructive solutions. This approach helps mitigate conflicts and contribute to positive social change. So kanina we have examples. Now I can give you a concrete example. No? So sometime months ago, may conflict sa aming community extension service, and maybe this is something relatable also for some of you, maybe different context, but may conflict sa aming community extension service. So may nangyari kasing transition sa school namin. So what happened was nag-retrench lahat, nabago lahat ang structure, etc., etc. But still maraming mga personalities na from the previous na structure, andito pa rin ngayon, but different na yung structure, pero same personality. So what happened was, sa community extension service na aspect, nahirapan sila to align everything. Bago yung head, bago yung mga ibang mga coordinators and all. So what I did is that, I can offer something. No? Sabi ko, let's use the conflict-sensitive journalism tools to resolve this conflict. So that happened. No? A workshop of conflict, the workshop of all the community extension service. We call it Social Action Center office in our school. No? So I share that also sa media educators of Mindanao. So what we did is to use the tool. What we did, we used the tool and then analyze kung ano yung mga pwedeng gawin moving forward, and to also look at the situations and also the past, no? Kung ano yung naging context in the past and why it is happening now. So again, the main issue is that overlapping of implementations, different directions, etc., etc. Although we anchor from the direction of our community extension service, but the problem is that kaya nga in place yung ibang mga community extension service on the ground level, kaya nag-iiba-iba yung mga directions now. Looking at the situation, ginawa namin is to make the timeline tool first and then the CSJ triangle, etc., etc. So we came up with the guidelines afterward. So that's I would say that the main point of that particular learning session is that we came up with a guideline that really helped the institution, no, na naging streamline yung operation in terms of community extension service. So ito is a concrete example that the CSJ tools is not only for media and journalists or journalism. It could be applied to all, even in your classroom setting. Napaka applicable ito. Okay. Now, we'll discuss one by one itong apat lang tools. But again, you already saved like a one semester for this particular topic only, because we discussed this as one semester spread out, of course, with activities and all. But with your level, of course, you will also, I'm sure you will grasp something here. But in your respective classroom, you can also modify how you go about it. But for this particular topic, I will also share to you some of the examples, no, or outputs of my students and also my personal output also. Every time I do something, or I'm very active on social media, no, I'm a media practitioner, but I'm also have my personal social media. Sometimes I discuss about topics, no, for example, napaka simple lang na topic, very personal to me, like itong issue ng tubig sa aming subdivision. You know that I can present to you one whole talks about it using the CSJ tools, no? Paano nangyari na ganito yung situation ng tubig, even up to the point na pwedeng ma-blame yung government because of what they did, because I did the timeline. I can share that in some other time maybe, but not for this particular session. So the four sessions or the four topics will be discussed, or the four tools, no? Isa-isahin natin yan. The first one, timeline tool. Okay, timeline tool, that it really helps you to review and sort key events. Of course, this is not something new to you. You have timeline in your Facebook, no? If pupunta kayo sa Facebook page nyo, profile nyo, and you want to, of course, there's also a new feature of Facebook like on this day. But if you want to really know a person now, especially if open ang kanyang Facebook to all, even if you're not friends on Facebook, you just have to go to his or her Facebook account and then scroll. If nag-share ba siya ng fake news or whatever, you will have a perception about him or her right away, no? So what I'm saying is that a timeline tool is like a visual visualizes how these events related to one another. So let's have an example. So a timeline tool, ganito yan sa when you employ or when you use the tool, you have to write that particular arrow, the double-headed arrow going to the past and going to the future. Through this, now we can have a better understanding of the event by putting all the facts in that particular timeline. So for example, like fact 1, it happened here. Fact 2, it happened in this particular time in that particular scenario, etc., something like that. So it's important that you teach your students, no, when they analyze conflict, and you also, no, you practice this, to really plot that down, no. So it's important to have that particular visual kasi mas madali natin siya later i-analyze. So the timeline tool can present the conflict and you will have a grasp of the significance of an event in that more complex conflict dynamic. So for example, sa fact 4 nangyari ang conflict, and then when you look at fact 4, you look at other facts in that particular timeline. Diba sa multiverse of sa MCU, no, different facts, different timelines, but they converge into one timeline or whatsoever, no? So yun din sa timeline tool, that you look at the fact and then look at the timeline of that particular fact. So in conflict sensitive journalism, or being a conflict sensitive, you also look at the tension. So I drew this all the time just to emphasize that I draw this particular red line just to emphasize that there's conflict in this particular point. So for example, like in fact 6, that's the height of the tension of the conflict, and there's a purpose of that, because later when we plot the timeline tool, and the next step will be CSJ triangle, or the triangle of violence of Galtung, the highest peak in that particular graph, or that red line there, or red graph there, that's where we analyze the conflict using the conflict triangle. Okay, so let's have an example. So our scenario, no? So there's a fire, may sunog, alas 10 ng madali, alas 10, past 10, midnight, may sunog sa isang village. And then, dumating yung fire truck 20 minutes after may reported na sunog. So dumating 20 minutes. And then, around that, after that time, natapos, you have to look at the timeline that 12:30 midnight, 12:30 early morning, and then 12:40 nag-start ng pinatay yung sunog. And then around 10 minutes after, na apula, na tapos na yung sunog, na control. And then 10 minutes after, may natagpuang patay sa loob ng bahay kung nasusunog. So where do you think the tension happened? Of course, doon sa may sunog, no? So nangyari is that ito yung pinakamataas na tension ng conflict or ng story, and then of course it peaked to that point nung may nakita yung may patay. So ano yung pinaka instinct na sinasabi natin, pinapractice ng media to cover, right? Isa ang patay matapos masunog ang isang bahay. That's it, no? Yun yung concentration. But if you are conflict sensitive and peace promoter, you have to go back to the timeline. So tingnan natin, like, bakit kaya namatay? Of course may sunog kaya namatay, but bakit kaya may mga minutes, like very crucial, every second counts in responding to fire? Bakit kaya matagal silang nakaresponde? Like you have 20 minutes, no, to respond from the time na 20 minutes, very very crucial yan. So you go back now, you by going back to the timeline, you will understand that baka may factors kaya matagal na apula yung sunog. Kasi pala they found out that yung parking area pala, yung daan pala ng subdivision or ng area na yan, ginagawang parking area. Kaya hindi nakapasok yung bumbero, and this might not be presented by the fireman during your interview, because again, hindi na ganun yung pagtatanong din ng mga media. Yung media, they concentrate on the dead person. But again, if you are a context sensitive or media with CSJ training or background, you will know that you have to go back to timeline. Baka meron pang issues deeper than the person. Of course, we're not disregarding meron talagang patay, and we have to include that in the story. But again, as CSJ practitioner and conflict sensitive and peace promoter, kailangan you have to go back na baka ito nga yung reason, no? Baka matagal because of this reason. So that's an example of a timeline. So that's a make-believe scenario. It happened maybe, but again, we'll now look at how this timeline can be applied in a scenario. For example, like Itbulaga, di ba? Sino bang hindi alam yung issue ng Itbulaga? So May 31, merong nangyari, no? TVJ went on live on Facebook. Hindi nga sila pinalive na through broadcast kasi nga may issues na, no? So, and they said that starting today, we will not be part of Tape Incorporated. We're disengaging with Tape, and as talent, they will go out of Itbulaga produced Tape produced Itbulaga, no? So meaning that day umalis sila. But if you are conflict sensitive and a CSJ practitioner, you should know that yung day na yan, that's just part of what transpired in the past, di ba? So what you've heard about this particular issue through the lens of the management of tape and through TVJ, yun lang nakukuha mo. But if you put that in a timeline, you can analyze things. So for example, I'll go back to February. Did you know that in February, hindi na natin alam that there was a trademark war already? So when I plot this particular timeline, I look at the registered intellectual property rights of Itbulaga, the trademark Itbulaga. So I went to IPO website and then search Itbulaga. In February, nagka-problema na sila because TVJ, I mean Tape Incorporated, filed an application for Itbulaga trademark renewal kasi mag-expire na nga siya ngayong June. Pero si Antonio Toviera separately filed another trademark application for Itbulaga in February. So looking at that particular application, you know right away na may issues na internally ang Itbulaga. And then March came. So March came, Halusos brothers or Attorney Halusos, the financial officer, went on public and said that they will be rebranding Itbulaga. So that really escalated to something, no? Sabi ng TVJ, who are you to do that to us, etc., etc. Because again, Toviera retired during that particular time, and Tito Soto came out on public through an interview about the particular issue at sinasabi nga na may bagong entity. They say that ganito ang ginagawa and it's affecting the relationships, etc., etc. But on April 19, Halusos went on Fast Talk that he emphasized that they own Tape Incorporated. This is for for many of us Filipinos, this is the first time that we've heard about it na 70% owned pala ito ng Halusos, ng Tape Incorporated, and we don't see the TVJ in the picture because again, sabi nga ng TVJ, sa amin naman na relationship is not transactional, it's friendship and all. But you know what happened, no? So wala talaga sila in papers, in documents na rights to hold a Tape Incorporated for whatever. So it's really owned by Halusos, and we know that during that time, April 19. And Halusos mentioned that it's not rebranding, it's rebonding. And now, it escalated to something. So debate na. So sabi niya ni Tito Soto, those are false statements and all. And it led to that particular day. On May 31, so TVJ and the rest of the original host of Itbulaga resigned. So napaka-simplistic naman ng example. Yes, because again, that's how we look at conflict now. In every aspect of conflict, titingnan ko, that's how I look at it, because that will make you have a sound judgment if you really need to come up with that particular judgment. But definitely, if you are a conflict sensitive and peace promoter, hindi ka right away to jump, no? Kasi sabihin natin, we can empathize right away to the host because again, we are maybe followers, but looking back, baka may issue nga internally sa corporation or whatever, no? So you have to look at it. So now, if your students will ask you, ma'am, anong nangyari sa Itbulaga? So you can always share that you know what happened, and it's really a sound judgment as a different perspective and mas deeper ang understanding of the issue. Okay? So let's have another example. 5 MILF men detained for illegal possession of firearms. So let's go back to the timeline where under the GPH MILF ceasefire agreement, MILF movement should be coordinated with law enforcers via peace mechanism to prevent misencounter and misunderstanding. So merong na-violate because it should be coordinated. Kung MILF magdala ng armas, kailangan alam ng police and ng army, no? Because again, this could escalate to something worse if ever, no? But for you to understand na nag-violate pala talaga ng MILF. Now, MILF should say na hingi ng tawad na lang because again, there may be instances there na may problema talaga. So that's another example. Okay, for a while. Now, sabi ko nga, CSJ tools are not only applicable for media coverage or war. Again, yung kung saan ito galing is really from war perspective or journalists covering war, and then nag-evolve na siya into another CSJ triangle and other tools. No? So now I will show you examples of output of my students. So for example, I gave them a topic. There was an instance here that the mayor answered through social media a complaint of Dabawenyo about water problem in Davao. So yung kasi nga may times na wala talagang tubig in this particular area, and then sabi ng isang netizen Davaoenyo that it should be the mayor who will provide the solution, etc., etc. And the mayor has his own Facebook account, replied to that particular thread, and then the screenshot pag yun ang nag-private message sa iya, and it escalated into a conflict yun, no, like people in the government versus these people nga nag-air out sa social media. So I asked my students analyze this particular story by using the timeline. So these are their examples. So ito I made the story here from Sunstar Davao. DCWD officials, water supply level in franchise area at threshold. So meaning, ito yung reason bakit may ganong issue from the conflict. So sabi ko sa mga students that look at the conflict by using the timeline. So what they did is that they plot the timeline, research about anything about this particular issue. So they went back as far as 2021 when ito pala ang reason. The bulk water project was delayed due to COVID-19 measures. So ang dali niyang i-explain, but the conflict now, it escalated into us versus them because again the mayor has said this and the netizens said this. But ang reason pala talaga is that because of COVID, yung bulk water project ng Apo Agua was delayed, no? So and going back na andun pa, and some other examples of the student outputs. So for example, this one, it went far as back as 2022 that DCWD implements a 39% water rate hike starting August. So medyo tumaas yung tubig because nga kulang na yung supply, etc., etc. So that's how they analyze the situation. So looking at the graph, sa yung red, parang na tawag niya heart attack sa different conflicts in this particular issue. Iba-iba yung mga conflicts niya. So they plot it based on this on their research, particularly on this issue. Okay, another one. So this is another perspective of that issue. Kasi yun pala may power outage yung April 28. Ito naman on a weekly na level. Kasi may power outage kaya naapektuhan lahat ng Dumoy water services ng DCWD. Kaya maraming bahay, many households were affected. So hindi siya yun yung issue, yung delayed ng water that's on a macro level, but on a micro level may power outage that particular week kaya naapektuhan. So this one goes to show na if you look at the issue now, iba-iba yung nakikita na natin, yung surface lang na level nadidig deeper na natin because we utilize the timeline. Okay? It's 10:46. I'll make this quick. I have until 11:50. Okay. The next tool is the CSJ triangle, or we call that, refer to that as Galtung's triangle. Just to emphasize later that it was adopted from the Galtung's triangle, ng CSJ. Adopted from Galtung's concept of the violence triangle, the CSJ triangle looks at news events through the three lenses. Directly observable. So if you notice later that we do not use in CSJ perspective, we do not use the term direct violence anymore. It's called directly observable, and the structural causality or causation and cultural realities that allowed it to happen. So ganito yon yung pag-evolve ng particular or ng adoption ng Galtung's triangle. So in Galtung's triangle, kanina inexplain yung physical harm that may or may not necessarily lead to death. That's the direct violence, and that's visible layer of the conflict. So Look at the left figures, like there's a line there, dividing that triangle. So like what I mentioned a while ago, that other groups use the iceberg framework because it looks like an iceberg, like the tip of the iceberg. Yung violence, yung conflict na nakikita natin, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Underlying perspective of the underlying issues there are invisible, meaning hindi mo nakikita, and it's up to us as teachers and communication practitioners and peace promoter to really look at the conflict, the underlying structural and cultural causes. So here in Galtungs, it's the aspect of cultural that can be used to legitimize violence. Because again, naging kultura na siya, kaya pwede na siya, or meaning meron na siyang like acceptance of whatever that conflict is all about. And structural violence, Galtung even coined that, even termed that as social injustice. Okay, so now in CSJ we have the CSJ triangle, although minimal ang kanyang revision on surface, like the terminologies, but definitely the same principles with Galtung, yung explanation niya. So this is now the CSJ triangle. It's a sober analysis tool kasi hindi nga siya pang war lang. Pwede din siyang gamitin sa creative brainstorming process. Okay? Maganda din ito sa film, if you're teaching film. So for example, you have your plot, and then ano yung pwedeng i-include mo doon sa story. You can look at cultural and structural. As with the triangle of violence, using CSJ triangle begins with the journalist, kasi journalism perspective ito, but for communicator, inquiring within the realm of visible. So ito yung visible, let's inquire further, deeper. Ano yung kaya yung cultural causation niya? Ano kaya yung structural causation niya? Stories for selection can include those with an overly physical dimension, like beating, killing doon sa direct observable, or they can be totally non-physical, like threats, intimidation, like workers going on a sit-down strike, for example. Kasi yung magsa-strike ka, for example, like hunger strike or sit-down strike ng mga workers, those are not war or violent scenarios, pero those are directly observable situations na pwede natin i-analyze. Okay, so that's how we use the conflict-sensitive journalism triangle. Now, in application, okay, anyway, I'll not go through this one by one, but you have your handouts, and this was discussed this morning a while ago. So, for example, there is an issue about city council policy imposing speed limits on motor vehicles. So, ang pinaka-direct observable natin dyan is that merong opposition na ayaw ng speed limit. Merong si city mayor supports the proposal. Now, let's dig deeper to that particular issue. Sa cultural aspect, how do people view motor vehicles? What influences their behavior on the road? What do people associate with speed? Is it about getting from point A to B? How does the internal dynamics of the council affects legislation? In the structural aspect, what is the average age of the city's working population? Bakit kailangan mo malaman yan? Later we'll explain. Where does the bracket 28-35 years old belong to? Are they the dominant age bracket, etc., etc.? What limited infrastructure development? So these questions, lumabas ito when you analyze a particular direct observable issue. Okay, so let's have answers to these questions. Okay, so direct observable, again, there's a city limit, there's a city council proposal to impose limit of speed of vehicle to 30 kilometers. Sabi ng mga ng mga opponent, or opposition, sabi napaka-silly naman, no? Slow moving vehicles only cause more traffic jam, sabi ng opposition. And the opposition also said that sabi namin that may maganda kasi yun sa ibang bansa na kasi merong mga freeways and merong mga tolls. That's why okay lang sa kanila to implement mga speed limit. Dito sa atin hindi pwede. And then the mayor supports the proposal. So may tension na, may problema na. Now, looking at the cultural and the structural aspect of that particular issue, alam mo na ngayon that the cultural aspect is that there is a ride fast and free and you only live once, YOLO attitude among the youth. Kaya kailangan na natin itong bigyan ng solution ngayon pa lang as early because ang mga may motor na mga teenage, mga youth, especially those who are allowed to use a motor vehicle, walang pakundangan, napakalakas magmaneho ng motor. And culturally, no, meron tayong ban mentality among legislators, like ban right away, ban this right away, ban this right away, no. And opposition administration councilors, no, napakahirap talaga na para sa mga citizens because they are affected, etc. And structural also, nakita natin that the biggest employers are call center, between 28 to 35 yung mga employees nila, and sila halos ang merong mga motor because mura ang down payment, etc., etc. This could, give us a perspective or understanding na kaya pala marami nang nagmumotor and ginagawa ng yung daan, racetrack, because marami nang nagkamotor because mura, mas maraming may trabaho, etc., etc. So those facts there being analyzed and using the tools, using the CSJ triangle tool, no, mas naintindihan natin ang issue. Let's have an example. For example, a while ago, no, I gave an example about our mayor here posted a conversation using his private Facebook account showing a Dabawenya complaining about the water supply. That's the direct observable violence. The student analyzed that it is intimidation, and it is also a right of the Dabawenya to complain, but the mayor posting that's an intimidation, no? So yun yung parang conflict now that could escalate later on to a bigger conflict. Now, structural violence, they said, sa perspective ng estudyante, the way he analyzed it, authorities and councilors pressured to respond to this issue because, again, for one, we have the branding, life is here. So, water is life. Kung walang water, bakit natin sinasabing life is here? Yun yung the way he look at the issue here. So, that's why kailangan meron talagang in place na mechanism, guidelines, in place na ordinances to avoid ganitong mga interruptions na very inconvenient. Now, if hindi naman talaga unavoidable, pero at least merong safety net in case, or merong mga mechanism or gawin ang city government, no, para maiwasan ito. Culturally, widespread of hate speech kasi nga telling that netizen na pahaw-haw or this brat, etc., for complaining. Culturally, parang naging reflection siya of the Philippine as a whole na hindi pwedeng mag-complain because ganito si mayor, magagalit or something like that. So naging cultural causation siya of that particular observable conflict. Okay, let's have an example, another. What do you think? I don't have time for you to answer this, but there is a story now of a 70-year-old woman killing her house help, no? And then dinrag niya yung nilagay sa isang sako. You know, this is a very prominent story now. Saka nakuha ng CCTV, tapos nilagay siya sa jail, no? Sa police precinct. And then, of course, that's a direct violence. So let's look at the issue. Ano ba yung structural violence? So safety of house help, no? Meron bang law na where I'm sure that hindi ito first time na nangyari, out of nowhere, like pinatay agad. I mean, meron itong mga, if you look at the timeline, perhaps makikita mo that there might be history of violence in that particular household already, because leading towards that unfaithful day, no? So now, ano kaya yung structural causation yan? Ano kaya yung naging, the reason why it reached to that point? So if you look at the timeline and then makikita mo din, you can also answer that. So again, if you notice, I have to emphasize this, that you have to go through this step by step. Hindi siya pwedeng, yes, you can use it, but mas effective siya if you start with the timeline. So you can analyze deeper yung cultural structural causation. So ano kaya cultural causation? Kasi nga, di ba, pag may mga helper, like, hindi naman sila nagrereklamo agad kung may kasi nga hindi nga empowered yung mga structural causation nga, walang empowerment ng mga helpers in terms of reporting violence inside the household kasi nga trabaho nila, kailangan nila magtrabaho and they don't want to stop their their work or their employment. So you have to analyze that particular story now in that context, in that perspective. Anong cultural causation, structural causation. So that's just an example. Okay. The next tool is Actors Map. The Actors Map is a powerful tool that helps practitioners of communication quickly identify voices that need to be given representation in the news kasi yun yung ano natin no sa perspective ng journalism. But for example, like if whatever field na nandun kayo, like if may problema, you have to use the Actors Map to avoid dualism, Manichaeism, and Armageddon. So I mentioned a while ago, like DMA. So ano ba yung DMA? Dualism, Manichaeism, and Armageddon. Dualism describes a state where audiences reduce complex issues into opposing sides. Yun lang, party A and party B. Manichaeism is when audiences begin to label one side as good and the other is evil. So sabihin natin, Dilawan is good, DDS is bad, and vice versa. So Manichaeism na yan. And that if we do that, then hindi tayo conflict sensitive. And Armageddon is the idea that battles or the equivalents who will decide the victor. So yun yung Armageddon na into the abyss, like in the final escalation of the conflict, yung may patay na, may nanalo, may patay, talo, yung pumatay or yung survivor, yun yung winner. So ganun yun. So for example, in the transport strike, for example, dualism is apparent in the reader's awareness. No, like sa news mababasa nyo yung dualism talaga, like the government and versus the affected transport sector na nagsa-strike. So the government, for example, they want to modernize public transportation, and the drivers and operators who want to initiate the initiative really want to be there will be displays in terms of job kasi nga mahirap naman mag-modernize ng vehicles, wala silang capacity to buy. So because it makes no sense for people to protest something noble like modernizing a service, kasi nga sabi natin, para sa atin yan, hindi naman yan masama na mag-modernize. So dualism, kasi nga the human mind simplistically, it concludes that government regulators are good kasi para naman to sa atin, nakakabuti sa atin. Therefore, the drivers and operators are evil. So A and B, dualism. So to avoid that, meron tayong Actors Map, and I will discuss in a while. The opposite can also be true. For example, ang mga readers might think that because it makes no sense for government to pursue initiative that forces drivers and operators out of work and business, the regulators must be evil and workers must be good. So mo na nang gitawag Manichaeism. So para bang they will just parang default that there is good and evil right away. What about the in-betweens? Then pursuant still to this, that what better way to resolve the issue once and for all is to establish the absolute truth. Sino ba talaga ang nasasabi ng katotohanan? And then with a grand battle where there can only be one victorious, and that is Armageddon. Okay? So sa CSJ and conflict sensitivity, hindi dapat dualism, Manichaeism, and Armageddon. There are more than two sides being represented in this particular diagram. So as you can see, may A, B, C, D until H, and you can have until Z. So sa Actors Map, each perspective may be distinctly different, but they are all interrelated and impact one another. The sources are then able to communicate with each other via the network of connections. So, and able to fluidly influence with others' perspective. So, if we are going to use Actors Map, the journalist, kasi sa journalist naman ito, or communicator using the Actors Map, are able to achieve two things. One, to provide the audience with more detailed and more nuanced picture, meaning mas maraming perspective. Kasi hindi lang A and B. We see a lot of perspective. So tayo, as communicator, we can see right away na baka hindi lang talaga ito ganito na story. It is more than that. And number two, if we are going to use this, it allows sources to communicate with each other. Kasi sabi ko nga kanina na hindi naman tayo doon to mediate about the conflict. For example, if you're a media practitioner, you're not there to mediate. You are there to present different perspectives. And by presenting different perspectives na mababasa ng mga involved parties, and they can communicate with each other because they know right away. So with the media being a platform for debate, consensus building, and compromise. Okay, so in making this will be your activity later on, the actors map and the onion. No? So again, the informations in your not to preempt the activity, but the informations are already provided by using the timeline tool and the CSJ triangle. But for your activity, you will be using the actors map, or you will be identifying parties involved and plot that in the actors map and later on in the onion. So ito yung actors map na tawag nito, legend. No? So the zigzag, that's conflict. It means that when you write your actors map or when you draw your actors map, for example, actor A, actor B, if you draw zigzag there, it means they have conflict. Okay? Importante ito when you plot your, for example, like you have your filmmaking, for example, or even news writing, for example, makikita mo right away in just the map, looking at the map, kung how do you angle the story. No? So zigzag A and B, that means conflict. So if there are other parties involved with conflicting also with the other parties, lagay nyo dyan sa conflict map nyo. No? So hindi ito siya definite na ganito talaga yung mukha ng map, but you can have a big as, depende sa inyo kung depende sa conflict din, how you plot it. And one straight line, not broken line, a straight line, it's an alliance. This is how you analyze the conflict now. Kaya pala, si B and si C may conflict because si A and C are allies. Ganon. So it's through the actors map, you can easily understand the entire conflict. Now, meron din connivance. So they are not directly involved in the conflict. May not be, they may be unnamed, no, walang pangalan. Hindi natin alam kung sino sila, but they are conniving with any of the parties. So for example, like party A pala is conniving with party D. So if you know that, no, it may not be known, but if you investigate and you know it, then you can put that in the map. Another in the graph is the broken alliance. May connivance pala si party D with party A because may broken alliance pala. Dati pala silang magkaibigan, but now they're, hindi pa pala sila friends kasi broken alliance. And there's also other actors. You can put that outside of that map because that could be another perspective in your particular story. Okay, so let's have the example again. So the water problem in Davao City. Okay, the water problem in Davao City. Let's look at the actors map. This one is again one of the outputs of my students. So ganito, no, very complicated, inibad din niya, but definitely it goes to show na analyze din ng student ang kanyang ang issue. Okay, let's have A. The letter A in the center with the gray background, that's mayor, and then yung conflict niya is C and B. Si netizen A, netizen B through Instagram, and si netizen C through Facebook, and then si letter D, spokesperson ng DCWD, may alliances sila ni mayor, of course, because government, and then si Apo Agua because nga may na-delay ang problem. Meron din siyang alliance with Davao City Water District and also sa contractor ng DPWH. Si contractor ng DPWH naman, although alliance sila ng government supposedly, pero may conflict naman sila ni mayor because nga na-delay ang kanilang mga. So those are the things that you can analyze through the map. Okay? I cannot show you now, but of course, I let the students explain this in a recorded video. So next siguro, I think I can show it in the succeeding mga trainings that how the students analyze an issue using this particular tool. Okay, another So kanina, no, you can see that medyo adept sa technology ang student, no, using a paint tool or whatever Illustrator tool that he or she used. But ito din, may estudyante din naman na ginawa din handwritten. So, I asked him to analyze the situation. So, ganun yung ginamit niya. So, when you analyze a situation, meron din siya talagang basis of that. Of course, the timeline, the triangle, and this map. No? So, mas madali sa estudyante now to analyze issues. Okay? Lastly, for the last tool, but I have integration of the tools later. Onion tool. Okay, Onion tool can examine all parties in that particular map. So you see that in that map, for example, A, so parang circle siya, di ba? You can also examine each party involved in that particular conflict by looking at the positions, interests, and need. What is position? Position is public stance. So, yung sinasabi nila publicly. No? So, again, this is media perspective. So, ano yung sinasabi nila in statements, comments, declarations, in which one individual or group announces what they want. So, for example, si Mayor, sinabi niya na hindi makaantay, walang pasensya ang mga taga Davao because kulang ng tubig and they don't know that blah, blah, blah. And the position naman ng netizen is that she called out the mayor and the government, etc. That's their public stance, that's their statements, that's their comments, declarations of the individual or announcement, no, of what they want. What is interest? Interest is the actual stake the parties have in conflict. So the interest of mayor is to provide services to the Davaoenos. The interest of the netizen is for the provider to provide that particular services now without inconvenience. So interests are actual stake of the parties having conflict. They describe what they really want to achieve and what motivates them in a certain situation. Sometimes they are voluntarily hidden, no, hindi sinasabi or not even acknowledged by the conflicting parties for fear of weakening the negotiation position. For example, frequently actors may have several subjective interests whose relative importance may change over time. So when we analyze the involved in the particular topic, conflict, no, yung interest sometimes hindi nakikita sa mga news, no, hindi siya hayagang sinasabi, but this is one of the what's good about analyzing conflict. Because you can dig deeper, no, research more about this particular issue. Needs, in the other hand, are the fundamental requirements that must be fulfilled in order for the conflicting parties. Ano yung need? Need ng party A, yung netizen na nagreklamo about water. Need yan ng tubig. That's it. Anong need ng mayor? Need ni mayor ng good services from the provider. And with good services, of course, bigay mo yung need ng mga citizens. So that's just one PIN, no? So it means that this particular PIN is for this particular actor in the map. Now looking at each position, interest, and need, baka meron silang the same na position or the same need or same interest. That's why when you analyze that particular issue, sabihin mo na agad, no, oh, pareho pala kayo ng interest, pareho pala kayo ng goal, pareho din pala kayo ng need. Bakit hindi na mag-usap? Something like that. No? So, through PIN or through Onion, you can right away, no, analyze the conflict. Okay, I'll skip this one. Okay, so let's have an example. Yeah. So, an example of that. So, this one, so nakita nyo, that's another actor's map of an issue in a barangay. So the story is that si Liling at si Payen nag-aaway dahil si Payen hindi binayaran yung utang. That's it, na simple, no? And tapos, itong si Aiki pala may connivance with Liling kasi may broken alliance sila ni Payen before. Kasi broken alliance sila, ally sila ni Payen. Hindi na sila friends. They're not in conflict, but definitely may broken alliance. So si Liling and Nike, they're conniving with each other, and alias Christian are also alliance with Payen. So yun yung issue, napakasimple, utang sa barangay. So you analyze now, ano ba yung pin ng isa't isa. So si Liling pala got angry of accusations. She insisted that there's no reason to be jealous of for they are just friend. Parang I sure di pala ito about utang. Sorry, about pala ito sa lovers, sorry. So itong si Liling pala, no, sinabi na nagalit siya because nagselos, and yung interest pala niya, she just want to make friends and have some fun, and then ito si Aiki pala, ang interest niya to make Liling aware of that parent told her. So mga ganitong mga stories, no, very minor, but in a sense this can be applied in your classroom. That start with small issues, no? I would say small issues, household, barangay level, and for them to just to get the feel of applying the tools. So here, looking at the example, nakikita natin that na-analyze yung story ng estudyante, even napaka minor na issues or na conflict. Okay? So using the PIN or the onion tool, PIN. Okay? Now, the four tools here, this could be used independently, no? Pwede silang mag-isa, but the proper use of this is really to integrate all of that, no? So now I will integrate all the tools, the four tools, via an example. Okay, so I have an example a while ago and I will show it now. So let's have the timeline first. So this will be, I'm on my last portion of my topic. Okay, I will integrate all the tools. Number one, okay, a while ago I mentioned that there's a fire in a particular village, and then dumating yung fire trucks at 12:30 midnight, and then dumating ang fire truck, and then inapula yung fire at around 12:50 before mag 1 o'clock. The fire is under control, and then they found a dead body in that household at around 12:60 or 1 o'clock. No, so that's 60 minutes after or 1 hour after the fire hits the village. So in this story, no, nakikita natin yung tension is really on the fire, after the fire, and then yung body na nakita. So kung hindi tayo CSJ practitioner, we will focus on the body found amid the rubble. But if you're a CSJ practitioner who utilizes timeline, we can see that there's more to that story. So for me, I think there's an issue here dito sa particular timeline, that it's past 10 midnight, nagkasunog, and then dumating ang fire truck around 20 minutes after. Okay, so I'll zoom into that timeline and then look at the structural and the cultural and the direct violence. So the direct violence is this one. Of course, kita niyo naman that it's a fire hits the village, and then the fire truck arrives 30 minutes or 20 minutes after. So what could be the cultural or the structural causation of this particular issue? So let's start with wait for a while. Okay, what could be the issue here? So like the structural na, okay, thank you, Ma'am Jill. Like outdated reporting our alert system. What technology is used in receiving information about the fire? How are the fire trucks dispatched? How are they stationed? How many stations are there? Structural siya kasi dapat nakalagay talaga dyan sa mga malapit na mga residential area, or kulang ba yung number of fire stations versus number of residents? Mga ganitong issue, you can look at the cultural. How about structural? Going back to structural, maybe there's also a point there, because I just trying to drive a point na yung bahay na nasunog, going there, meron palang mga sasakyan na nakapark, like I mentioned a while ago. So is it structural or cultural? Of course, that's cultural because we allow that to happen na, kasi nga pag may sasakyan, may kaya, and the neighbors, you know, they don't complain because again may kaya yung neighbor, that's why we allow that to happen. So cultural. And then structural there is wala pa naman kasing law, no, bago lang yung law na hindi pwedeng magkasasakyan kung walang parking space, something like that, no? So you analyze now the cultural and the structural. So nakita natin na okay, merong problema sa ganitong area. Merong mga sasakyang nakapark, kaya pag rumisponde, matagal ang mga bumbero makarating. Okay, so now the cultural pala is that inalaw pala. Nung nag-investigate tayo, inalaw kasi kaibigan pala ni kapitan, kaibigan pala ni councilor, anak pala ni councilor yung may-ari, something like that. Cultural because again, we yung people in power, culturally, tayo mga Pilipino, parang hindi na tayo umaalma because yun yung kultura natin. So looking at that triangle, we can zoom in to issues by using the multi-party geometry actors map. So, ang actors map pala ito. So, sa residents, nagreklamo ngayon kasi na through your investigation, oo nga pala, because of the sasakyan, yun pala problema kasi nakapark, anak pala yun ni mayor, anak pala yun ni councilor, something like that. So, nagreklamo ang residents. Sinasabi ng residents ngayon that ang Bureau of Fire din naman may problema. Matagal silang nag-respond, etc., etc. And then si Fire Department, motor pool ng Bureau of Fire, of course, their ally, may dati na palang concern because may conflict na pala because nung gumawa pala ng fire drill, hindi pala nag-participate yung residents. Ito pala yung history. So you know this when you investigate na, no? So kaya pala, no, hindi pala sila nag-participate sa fire drill ng barangay na yan, kaya may conflict na pala dati. And then moving on in that map, so the residents and the barangay council or the conniving are their ally, and also the city LGU. So they want to complain. So sabi ng residents na LGU, can you make a move na kailangan talagang compulsory na mandatory na ang mga fire drill, hindi lang siya voluntary, something like that. Barangay Council should pass a resolution kasi sabi, andun nagpa-park, regardless kung sino ito, anong background ng mga nagpa-park, dapat may barangay resolution na bawal kasi nga very dangerous, something like that. No, yun yung mga nakikita natin that this could be part of the analysis later on. And of course, since the LGU and City Hall or Barangay Council are connected, and since they are connected, no, mas madali na lang itong ma-resolve. Again, we did not present the resolution. I mean, we did not present the possible solution of this, but analyzing this one, when we are engaged in this particular issue, mas alam na natin, no? Alam na natin paano siya i-deal, paano natin. Wait for a while. Thank you. And also, yung mga outsiders na hindi kasali sa issue na ito, but may direct involvement in a sense kasi nga kung urban planners ka, you will plan ahead of time na mas safe talaga if we can give ample space sa road and residential area, etc. para pag may ganitong mga instances, something like that. No, so we analyze the map. And then we zoom into the parties involved in this particular map. So when we zoom in using the onion tool, let's zoom in, okay? Bureau of Fire Protection, residents, and barangay council. So again, si Bureau of Fire Protection, meron na siyang conflict with the residents kasi nga may number one, may mga sasakyan. Number two is that hindi sumali sa fire drill, and residents and barangay council are allies. Of course, they're in one community. So we'll analyze their position, interest, and need. Ano ba yung position, interest, and need nila? So maybe, no? Let's just assume. Position ng Bureau of Fire. Sabi ng Bureau of Fire, matagal kami nakaresponde dahil mayroong mga sasakyan na nakapark sa labas ng bahay, doon mismo sa daan kung saan yung may sunog. Ang posisyon naman ng residents is that kailangan dumating agad ang fire protection because may sunog, mas madali maapula kung may bumbero. Ang posisyon ng barangay council, the same. Okay? Ang interest is that ng verifier is to protect the residents. Ang interest naman ng residents is to be protected. Ang interest naman ng barangay is for the residents to be protected. Pareho naman pala sila ng interest. Bakit may conflict pa? And the needs, of course, the needs to be protected and the need to be secured. Yun pala, the same naman pala tayo ng needs, same pala naman tayo ng interest, magkaiba lang natin positions. How about let's settle this? So something like that. So as a communicator, kung ano man yung role mo dyan, no, you can present that story with using all these tools, no? And you can also analyze, this particular conflict. So looking at those examples, you see right away na ang conflict or war, for example, it's really difficult to analyze. But using these tools, it helps you to gain more perspective. It gives you more understanding of the issue. Understanding of the parties involved in the issue, about their positions, interests, and needs. So that's the tools for conflict sensitivity and peace promotion.